Gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Hi, welcome to the Silver Spleen. My name is Darren Kenneth O'Brien, and this is my review of White Storm 2, Drug Lords. White Storm 2 is a name-only sequel to 2013's White Storm, which was written and directed by Benny Chan. This new film is written and directed by Herman Yao, with co-writing credits going to Erica Lee and Eric Lee. White Storm 2 tells the story of two men whose lives are linked by their past and present involvement in the drugs trade. Andy Lau plays Tin, a very successful businessman, with a past he'd just as soon keep in the dark. Louis Koo plays Daejong, a man whose ambitions drive him to do whatever he feels is necessary to become the biggest and best drug lord in Hong Kong. Kent Cheng plays a character that we might reasonably call Quan Corleone. Sick. He's an old-school mobster with a zero-tolerance approach to drugs. In the first act, Louis Koo finds out the hard way that biting the hand that feeds you might cost you fingers. That's not a euphemism. Michael Mew plays a widowed cop who will do anything to stop the flood of drugs into Hong Kong and bring the people responsible for it to justice. Chrissy Chow plays Teen's ex-girlfriend in what amounts to a glorified cameo. Carlos Chan and Michelle Y play Mew's subordinates. Karina Lam plays Teen's wife, a successful lawyer who's facing a much more personal challenge. As was the case with Heaven in the Dark, I really wish that Karina Lam and Michelle Y had switched roles. Karina Lam has all the emotion and effusiveness of an aloe vera plant, and her idea of emotional distress is quite evocative of an aloe vera plant in a blender. It also has the same gastrointestinal effects. The scene where Karina and Andy Lau have a titanic argument simply doesn't work. Partially it's the dubbing, and partially it's because neither one of the actors in that scene come across as being very emotionally invested. But, like the rest of the movie, my biggest problem with that scene is the writing. What comes off as a pretty standard marriage spat is somehow, narratively, turned into a cataclysmic event. It just feels really forced, like, well, this has to happen in the narrative arc, so no, there you go. Then again, we're talking about a script where the good guy is named Heaven and the bad guy is named Hell. I've said on several occasions that while I love and admire Herman Yao's directing, I am similarly not enamored of the writing of Erica Lee and Eric Lee. A lot of the plot of White Storm 2 comes off like a TVB drama. It also comes off like a Barbara Wong movie in that there's absolutely nothing in it that's original or unexpected. I mean, it's really sweet that Carlos Chan proposes to Michelle Y, but it's completely unsurprising what happens after that. Of course there's a big, noisy, unnecessary car chase full of crashes and screeching tires and digital effects. Because that's how these movies always are, right? Why is the main cop a widower struggling to raise a daughter alone? Because that's how these movies always are, right? Why does the daughter have friends getting into the very stuff that her father is so valiantly fighting against? Because that's how these movies always are. And by the way, whoever can find the bartender in this movie that served girls who are very obviously about 12 years old, please kill him. Now, Hong Kong's view of drugs is vaguely admirable in its chronic insistence on the negative aspect of what they do to people. But it doesn't really help when the view of drugs and the people who use them is so oversimplified that it makes me wonder what are the Chinese characters for reefer madness. Hong Kong's anti-drugs PSAs are special.
Drugs are bad, okay?
From what I've read, cocaine does not, in fact, equal heroin. Neither does ketamine. Speaking of which, ice is not cocaine. It's methamphetamine. Why tell the truth when you're doing the right thing, right? Besides, the most effective of these is probably the one that says, don't do drugs because it makes you ugly. That's sadly pertinent to White Storm 2, both generally and specifically. In a scene set in a Manila drug den, the editing makes it seem like marijuana and methamphetamine are roughly equal in their effects and their evilness. They're not. And speaking of false equivalencies and the Philippines, White Storm 2 gives us an actor playing an obvious version of Rodrigo Duterte, and even uses a real photo from the ongoing Philippine war on drug users. But there's never any mention of where all that methamphetamine and or the precursor chemicals that you use to make methamphetamine come from. I don't know why they don't tell us, but I can guess. Speaking of guesses, don't ask me how I know this, but psychedelic mushrooms don't kill you no matter how many of them you eat. You do get high as a giraffe ass and end up having a really insightful discussion with John F. Kennedy while both of you are riding purple elephants, but you don't die, from what I've read. Speaking of dying, that is what you do when you get shot in the head at close range. You don't do anything else after a headshot except maybe write bad scripts. Now, I realize that now may be too late to say it, but there are actually things about this movie that I really liked. That car chase at the end may be over the top, but it doesn't take away from the stellar stunt driving on ample display in the rest of the movie. The car stunts are among the best reasons to watch this movie. The other is, of course, the directing. The thing I admire most about Herman Yao is his uncanny ability to create movies that are better than they should be. I was also glad to see that Herman Yao retains his ability to leave small but potent markers for viewers astute enough to notice them. I enjoyed how morally ambiguous this film really is. Yes, the bad guys get what's coming to them, because 1.4 billion people is a big market, but the good guys are also guilty of some pretty serious infractions. No one looks good at the end of this movie, and I appreciated that. Well, no one except Louis Koo. He makes, I don't know, something like 130 movies a year. Maybe it just seems that way. And I've said before that it would be unfair of us to expect him to act in each and every one of those. But in White Storm 2, he is a ton of fun to watch. He's very obviously having a grand old time with the character, and he's seriously as much or more fun to watch than Tony Montana ever was.
How am I gonna get a scar like that eating pussy?
He starts out funny and honestly just keeps getting funnier as the movie progresses. Herman Yao's direction, the car stunts, and Louis Koo's performance are 3 reasons that make White Storm 2 worth the price of admission. Yeah, pay to watch movies. If you enjoyed this review, please let me know, and if you didn't, let me know. If you like the channel, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.